Good, very good. Right, how is everybody? Good? How are your buttocks? Lovely buttocks. I thought you were feeling your buttock. No, you weren't.
I guess it was.
Are we all quiet today, or is it just quiet? We're quiet. So it's ATM time, is that what you're telling me? By not speaking, are you telling me that it's ATM time? I hear you. Okay, lie down. So I think I mentioned on the board is the some reminders for things for you to choose from for the ATM teaching tomorrow. And a reminder, Dan and I were just discussing, they're not in any particular order, right? So under the structure or the body of the ATM, I've got things like scan, reference movement, test movement, etc. That's not necessarily in the order that you would do it in, because then I've got, rules of the game sort of thing. And it may be that if you're teaching a class for the first time, you might actually go through the sort of rules first, and by rules, I mean our principles that you work within the boundaries of ease, that it's not going, you go slow, blah, 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 all those sorts of things. Okay? So it's not an order, not an ordered list particularly. So take this opportunity to reacquaint yourself with yourself. It's this kind of regular check-in, how am I going? And you might not be going anywhere, so it might be, how am I being? And do you actually take this opportunity to check in with yourself when you're not in the room? How many of us, we wake up in the morning and it's such a rush and you get up and you never actually just stop and inquire after your own well-being. And you might do it, you might get to work or you might get to the breakfast table and say, how are you to somebody? Maybe it's a real question, but maybe it is, a platitude. So how can we turn this question into something that's meaningful? And could it become a lifelong habit? So that you really are interested in how you are. And therefore you can become really interested in how other people are. So when my clients walk in, we do the usual, hi, how are you? Yes, fine, how are you? So I ask them, how are you? And they say, yes, fine. And then I say, and how are you, really? So you have to ask twice, right? Because you have to get rid of the social crap first, don't you? It's just so automatic. It's so automatic. Scripted, yeah, fine. Or, because we're Australians, we probably don't say fine. We probably say, yeah, not bad, which is incredibly specific. And how are you sensing today? What are the sort of senses that are most at your disposal? have you had, an introduction to the different kinds of sensing? I don't think I did that in Sydney. No, has anyone done it in here? No. No one's moving, so I take that as a no. Okay. Quietly and gently, just start flexing both hands in that bell movement. So take a moment to really allow your attention to sink that much more deeply towards your hands and the fingers and the thumbs. And that this movement is kind of a movement of them collectively, but there is an element of your attention to the individual as well, isn't there, right? So that they are all, none are forgotten. And how does the movement grow? That you can maintain the quality of the movement in both hands, so that by doubling your amount of activity, you're not halving the quality. And gently, quietly bring your hand, continue to keep your hands moving and have them come up into the air so that you're resting on the back of your elbows. So your forearms are coming vertically out of the floor, as it were. And during that movement, that you can keep the quality of the hands. Sorry. And is it easier to track the quality with your hands in mid-air, as it were? So they've got more freedom of movement, but you don't have now a tactile sense to tell you where they are. How do you navigate that change of the data coming in, the information coming in? And are your palms of your hands pointing in the direction of your feet, or they kind of pointing towards each other? It's like your hands are talking to each other. Or are they pointing towards your head? And just spend a moment exploring the orientation of the palms of your hands as you're continuing this movement. Slowly, slowly. So the timing is slow, right? We've established that's not really negotiable. Well, actually, now I've said that, you're probably all anarchists and you'll just try a few little quick ones just to see. Let's try the orientation, so that turning of the forearm, perfectly fine. Turning of the forearm so that it kind of carries the hand. I often think of this, there's a whole ATM around this that I used to teach a lot. It's like your hands are a flag on a flagpole and they get blown around. So it's very kind of lazy turning. It's not a powerful turn. Often that turning of the forearm is powerful. It's turning on a tap or turning off a tap, and it can be fast and very kind of vigorous. But here it's very languorous. It's very easy. It's very, very nice. Morning. And make a quiet decision about where you feel that the movement of the hand is most, the orientation of the hand is the easiest for you to sustain. So remember, this is a sustainable activity because this ATM does go for approximately 120 minutes. That's not true. I just want you to think about things, in the long term. I feel like I'm kind of doing an environmental theme. Have you noticed this sort of everything has to be sustainable, and I'm wanting you to think about, the way you use your energy and your attention in a sustainable way. Maybe that's you, Ella. It's because we're talking about environment on the very first day. you think? Just in my brain. So our activities sustainable. And now with your feet, could you start to imagine, think through that your feet could do an analogous kind of movement of flexing? What would that feel like? So go ahead. So if you've got your feet standing, that's actually fine, because remember you started off with your hand doing this movement face down on the floor yesterday. So you may be able to do this kind of flexing, drawing up on the floor. If your feet are long, I think that's perfectly fine too. And of course, in true ATM fashion, I'll get you to swap over later. But however you are now, just try. Just try. What does that mean? Have a crack. Yeah. Can you compare the ease of doing this movement with your hands and your feet? How do they compare? So of course we know, feet and hands are structurally, anatomically closely related, but they become the poor cousins neurologically as we develop, and they specialise for weight bearing and conforming to surfaces, and our hands specialise for dexterity. But is there still that basic similarity in your internal sense of them? Could you find that basic similarity? So that you can be aware of the sole of the foot as you are the palm of the hand, and that it has that sense of, you can have the sense of the sole of the foot, as it were, kind of closing a little bit as well, with the toes, and all of the toes. So neurologically it is hard to sense the individual toes, but could you, in a way, could you almost fake it? Could you use the sense of your hands to superimpose over the top of the sense of your feet to enrich that image? And to do that, are you synchronizing the movement of the hands and the feet? And if you are, desynchronize them. And if you are not, synchronize them, to see why did some people make the choice to entrain the two together, and why did somebody keep them separate? And examine your choice in that quiet, curious way. And neither is right and neither is wrong. They are two options. You could vote Liberal and you could vote Labor. Did that make your sphincters tighten? Oh, well, you see, I've only got two choices here. You're swinging both ways. The whole point of Feldenkrais is to turn everybody bi. Bipartisan, I mean. What did you all think? Bilingual. Yes, that's what I meant. Bipolar. binary. And leave it. Rest everything. Now catch what you do now. Where does your attention go now? What thought flashed across your mind? What was your immediate response? Leave it. Just, you don't have to judge it. It's just interesting for you. And if you had to draw yourself at the moment, what would your proportions be like? Obviously, I'm interested in the proportion of the hands and the feet. Compared to the arms and the legs, the pelvis, the spine, the head. Could you entertain this conceit, this, you know, you think about the right thumb, you sense the right thumb, you feel the right thumb and the right big toe, the 4 fingers on the right hand and the 4 other toes on the right foot. How's your breathing? Gently start doing the bell movement with both hands. And as you commence, then quietly lift your forearms so that you're standing on your elbows, as it were. I think you could all become conductors. Very. Or, bless you, hypnotists or seaweed. And again, and add in the feet gently. Oh, what we didn't do was swap, right? The people who had so just establish the gentle flexing and extending of the feet. And the feet means, of course, all of the feet, right? Not just the ankles or just the toes. And quietly bring one at a time up to the standing position. If you didn't have them standing before, if you did have them standing before, your legs will be long. Sorry, I completely forgot to give you the alternative. So that you are fully informed. I've given you both how to vote cards. So that you can, when you make a decision about voting to have your feet up or your feet down, you're fully informed. You know the options. You know the pros and cons. So you can check out the influence of having a surface as a reference to this gentle kind of curling of the feet and the folding of the feet and the unfolding of the feet, you could think. Now choose whichever you find the most, well, let's say easy, right? So you can choose. Go into that position. So either legs long or legs up. Because we're going for sustainability, right? And now start to increase the timing, increase the rate of the opening and closing of the hands. So that it becomes fast. We often don't use the F word. But every now and again we do use the F word. I used to be notorious for using the F word, but I am maturing, Fran. Yes, I have learned to inhibit.
Quarter of a century later.
That's right. So how is that to increase the rate of opening and closing the hands and that the quality doesn't diminish, right? So you maybe you've doubled the activity again, doubled the speed, maybe tripled the speed, and there is no compromise with quality. You haven't reduced the quality by a third. How do you do that? And what happens spontaneously with your feet? Because I didn't tell you anything about your feet. Did your feet did they increase their rate too, or did they keep slow? That's your choice. And now, without stopping, could you take the hands out of sync? So as one is opening, the other is closing. So they're alternating. So those of us who are have our laterality challenges. Now remember this feeling when you feel like an unco, you know, this uncoordinated kind of vaguely spastic feeling. Really be interested in this feeling of, I feel really awkward. Because for some people it's quite unfamiliar. For some of us it's quite familiar. And remember this, because this is building your capacity of, you know, understanding the experience of all these different realms, because you're going to be working with people where this is their daily experience. You know, that on a minute by minute basis, they feel like they just cannot coordinate. They're just out of sync. And can you find a level of comfort here that it's okay, and be more curious about the incoordination? Right? Or you might feel the ego rising and going, you know, judging, and I'm an unco, and this, I'm going, you know, no wonder my mother never let me, you know, set the table with the bone china. Or, gee, that sounds like it comes from a real life experience, doesn't it? No, she did. I'm not. I could do the bone china. And how could you tackle this coordination issue? So one strategy is to go slower and just really think about getting one hand going. Now, I did say go fast and without stopping, swap. And that was to put you in this state of incoordination, right? However, now you can try, so Silvana, you can try that kind of self-guided thing, and you can slow down and use your strategies, right? About how do I re-establish quality? I'm going to go slower. I'm going to alternate my attention. I'm going to think about one. I'm going to get one happening first and then overlay the other, or whatever it is. And now gently, so most people have reached some level of capacity with alternating the hand. Quietly spread your attention without any sense of dismay to what the hell your feet have been doing all that time. Did your feet entrain to your hands? Is that how you coped? Did they just keep on doing their merry thing? Or did they just stop? So here's the thing. How about your feet keep working together and your hands are alternating with each other? How about that? No using of the F word. So your hands are alternating and your feet are just flexing and extending together, synchronous. And you stopped breathing. I want you to stop breathing. Hold your breath. Alan Questel did this multitasking advanced training earlier in the year. I really wanted to throw something at him in a multiple way. I wanted to throw multiple things at him. Now go back to everything being synchronous and easy. Well, I shouldn't have said easy, just go back to everything being synchronous in your ease. Lovely. What do you notice? Fran and I can see it. Breathing, yes, 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 all the oxygen got sucked out of the room instantly. Right. So don't be frightened when you're teaching ATM of making, imposing a real challenge. I think you said this in your checklist. We go from the challenging to the difficult. We'll do that too. But, you do something that feels hard, you make it even harder, and you come back to that original difficult thing, and maybe it actually feels easier. Again, it's the 80-20 rule. I'm not saying everybody in the room has to experience this. But we don't have to be frightened as ATM teachers of introducing a challenge that is, for some people, impossible. Okay, rest everything. Catch up on the oxygen intake, carbon dioxide extake. Heal any bruised egos that you couldn't do it, or you could, or any egos that are clapping because they could do it. Whack them on the head too. There are no place for these sorts of things in here. Are you all nervous that I'm going to bring in some of Fran's stuff as well while you're flexing your, both hands and both feet? Thinking how many things can flex and extend at the same time, or open and close at the same time? Well, let's try. No. Gently, slowly, slowly, slowly start to do the bell movement with both hands. And they can gently kind of rise up into the air. It's almost like this puppet string kind of thing. There's this beautiful kind of effortless, like gravity just suddenly isn't such a big deal. 9.8 meters per second just maybe loses a few somethings. And then gently, slowly add in your feet with that same kind of ease. I can do this in the long haul, but smooth. And keeping your hands synchronous, could you now have one foot flex while the other's extending? So your feet are alternating and your hands are not. And you've all done these kinds of things. My classic example that you all, well, those of you who drive relate to, cast your mind back to when you learned to drive, right? And you had to do all these separate things. And you thought, wow. I remember when my stepson learned to drive, I could see him looking at me going, how did Susan learn to do this? Because, he'd watch me obviously driving him around all his life with no great drama. And then so he just had this assumption that it must be easy because I'm not particularly adept at that kind of stuff, right? And he got such a shock, and there's so many little things, but we learn. We learn to put them together, and then we can take them apart. So we can, we can change gear at different times. There are associations. When we talked about this idea of associations yesterday very briefly, that we start associating individual tasks within the driving together, but we can disassociate them so that we don't, we don't have to change gear in an automatic car. So we can take subtasks out and put them back in. We can generally adapt when we jump into a Japanese car and the indicators are the opposite to the windscreen wipers. You see, so we have that within the overall complex task. We can take out a component, put it back in and adapt it. And that's what you're doing now. And you're doing it in the matter of minutes. I'm sure that most of us didn't learn to drive a car in a matter of minutes. But you go slow, right? Good. Leave it, rest. And have you found a way by day 3 of doing this, the bell hand movement, in a way that doesn't overtax the little muscles of your forearm? Can you use that learning so that you're now not feeling a little tweakiness or a little bit of fatigue in the small muscles at the front of the shin, for example? Because they're the analogous muscles and they're not big, right? They fatigue quickly. They're not designed for hard repetitive movement. They're designed to just be fancy. Quietly and gently begin to flex and extend your hands. Thank you, Lisa. And have them float up into the breeze. Add in your feet. And how would you organize yourself so that your hands are alternating and your feet are alternating in the opposite way? How would you go about establishing that linkage, series of linkages? And again, you're applying the principles of quality, shifting attention, going slow. And you'll start linking groupings of sensations, actually, if you really want to know technically what you're doing. And feel absolutely comfortable with failure, complete abject failure. Because it's not really, is it? I mean, you know, this is, I think it was Carol, you know, used the word ridiculous. These are ridiculous things. Your life actually will go on if you can't do this. The sun will still come up tomorrow. And you can get this, you know, you brought it up with your checklist, this childlike thing. You know, actually little kids don't have a sense of failure. They learn a sense of failure, right? Can you unlearn your sense of failure and simply muck around? This is simply interesting. I'm a work in progress. I've just had this crazy idea. I'm having a crack. And for some of you, you might get this feeling of, oh, I've actually got it, but you kind of almost don't want to breathe because it's tenuous. So you're in the middle of this learning. And so there's a little part of you that's sitting beside you watching how you learn, how you explore, how you use feedback. And when you've had enough, you've had enough. Because no little kid will keep on playing when they've had enough, when they've finished exploring. They're on to the next cupboard. I think one of the most distressing things I saw a couple of years ago, I was walking at the beach, and this parent had a toddler, so it must have been somewhere between 1 and 2, at the beach, and she'd given the kid an iPad. At the beach. Like this, you know, what a beautiful environment for kids to muck about in. You know, kids just, they can lie on the sand and flex and extend their feet and their toes and their hands for hours. Sand and water and seagulls and dogs, and this poor kid was already being trained to ignore all of that environmental richness to play on a blinking iPad. I wanted to take the iPad and do something with the mother's head. Yeah, throw it in the sea. That's my level of tolerance. If you could watch yourself, though, you would see why I brought up a sea kind of story, because you all do look like kids at the sea. You just look like you've been lying in the sun and you're just, you know, a little bit sleepy. Have a beautiful, full, well-deserved rest. It's a kind of a pussycat lesson, really, isn't it? And take a moment to ask yourself with a genuine curiosity, how am I? Not as in I, as in me, as in you. How are you? And again, if you were drawing a picture of yourself, would you add more detail to certain parts of yourself? Would you change dimensions of yourself? Would you add different colours? How do you feel about your feet now? And your hands? Are you glad you're not a centipede and we made you do that lesson? Okay, so keeping your hands and your feet in mind, quietly, slowly roll over to one side, come up to sitting and then standing. Keeping this internal focus as usual, but with this slight bias towards your hands and feet. So how have your feet landed on the floor? How do you inhabit your feet? How do they make contact with the floor? Can you be aware of the parts of your feet that don't contact the floor? It depends on the surface that you're standing with. It's like all these little articulations within your hands. You start to get a sense of the analogous articulations in your feet. Now very gently, just move your weight from one foot to the other. And is there an echo of this kind of flexing and extending, this change in the, the shape of your feet as you go from one foot to the other? Could you feel some echo of that flexing and extending? Maybe in different combinations. But would that make sense? That somehow or other we're familiar with this alternating. Very gently increase the sort of the degree that you're shifting the weight so that actually one foot can lift up, and then pay attention to the way it comes back down again, how it leaves the floor and comes back down again. Do this within the capacity of your balance. And start doing the bell movement with both hands, so together. And then start to add in the travel component, so the progression component to the walking, so that the foot that comes up actually places in front of you more. And how does it contact? And how does the back one leave? And keep on slowly, slowly walking. And there's this sense that there is this flexion and extension kind of pulse through you as you're walking. Your hands are continuing to gently, sustainably flex. You may want to quietly shift so that your hands are alternating as well. And what connections do you build in order for your brain to cope with all of those different things? So how do you multitask in that sense? Play around with that. Could you go backwards? Does that change the sort of sequencing or not? It certainly would change the way your feet contact the floor in terms of the sequence of the way they contact. And then drop all notions of flexing and extending and simply walk with no attention to anything other than not hitting somebody or bumping into somebody. Could you just drop it? Just leave it. And if I said turn, could you turn quickly? I just like to do that because I like to see the power of influence of my voice. No, that's not true. Which foot did you turn on? Could you turn on the other foot? Could you just add in one hand flexing and extending while you're walking, and then every now and again make yourself turn, so it's no big deal? Change hands. Leave it rest and come and sit on your mat for a moment. Just sit. And find somebody near you. Just take 5 minutes each. So we'll just do that classic I'm talking, you're listening thing.